Looks like we're all good. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining in. I'm happy to have Lynn Yeowart joining us today. Thanks, Lynn, for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Jackie. Hi, everybody. Hope we have a great conversation tonight.
So, Lynn's a professional writer, editor, and manuscript assessor for more than 25 years of experience in writing and editing everything from captions for artworks to speeches for executives. She also formats and edits academic theses, helps writers develop and polish their work, and works with visual and performing artists who need to words to promote themselves and their work. Her debut novel, The Silent Listener, which I can see yours in the background, and I've got my copy here, is a psychological thriller that weaves fiction and events from her childhood on a farm in rural Victoria. It's enjoyed considerable success, including 3 overseas publishing contracts, being optioned for a screen adaptation, and most recently being shortlisted in the 2022 Indie Book Awards in their debut fiction category. So thanks, Lynn, for joining us again. And just want to mention as well that thanks to Penguin, if anyone's watching and ask a question for Lynn, they'll have a chance to win a copy of The Silent Listener. Just wondering, Lynn, if you want to start off by telling us a bit about The Silent Listener.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. As you said or read out, it's a psychological thriller. But it also explores I'm going to say, the short and long-term ramifications of family trauma and abuse. That's not all grim and bleak. That might sound grim and bleak. It's not all grim and bleak. There's a protagonist who has a rare form of synesthesia, which means that she sees images in her head when she sees and hears particular words. There's a couple of suspicious deaths. There's a missing 9-year-old girl from the past. And it's primarily about 2 sisters who return home to the farm that they grew up on, ostensibly to nurse their dying father. And they decide to take revenge on him for what he did to them in the past. But not quite everything goes to plan. So there's a lot of obstacles in their way. There's a lot of going back and considering the past, right back to when their parents met and got married and what happened in that relationship. The missing girl, the time that she went missing when the girls are young, and then, sorry, I'm just going to take a glass of water. And then what happens when their father is actually found dead. There's a cop and a local GP who come in to kind of try and work it all out. And Joy, the protagonist, the young girl, is the prime suspect in the murder.
Yep, no, that's a great introduction. Thanks. Just wondering, would you like to share maybe a little bit to read to us?
Oh, yeah, sure. That would be great. Okay. My favourite bit to read is from very early on in the book. So the father has been found dead, and Joy, the protagonist, has gone looking for something in the bedroom. So I'll start a little way into that. I stick my hand into the darkness and my palm hits something sharp. I peer in, and there it is, a solitary nail hammered into wood, and hanging on the nail is a belt. One belt and 10,000 magenta screams. I see my father pushing back his disguises and reaching in for that belt, oblivious to the old screams in there. Then later, hanging it up delicately, obsessively, oblivious to the new screams. I unhook it and hold it in my hand. It's a simple farmer's belt. Wait, allow me to clarify. Not the belt of a simple farmer, but a simple belt that belongs to a farmer. Correction, belonged, past tense, which sounds delicious on my tongue. The belt is made of plain black leather and has a silver buckle with a silver tongue. That's how they describe it in, say, a criminal trial, but that's only its outward appearance. More accurate for the defence counsel to say, with much emphasising and heavy pauses and gesticulating, yes, members of the jury, just an ordinary, simple farmer's belt. But allow me to tell you what you can't see when you look at this belt. This belt is 35 years long and 2 children wide, and old blood leaks out of every hole. Children's blood. Run your fingers down it and feel not leather, but pain. Hold it up to your nose and smell not leather, but fear. Bend it and hear not leather creaking, but children screaming. The people in the gallery would gasp, and the jury members would shake their heads, appalled, if it ever got to trial. This is the first time I've held it. Of course, I've seen it before and heard it hundreds of times, dividing the air above me, and felt it exactly the same number of times. Now I am the one holding it, and he is the one on the bed, quiet and afraid. Surely he is afraid, now that his time has come. I lift it towards my face. The defence counsel was right. The smell of fear burns your nostrils.
Thanks for reading that part. That was a very eerie sort of section of the book.
Maybe you should choose a more light-hearted.
I think it was a good choice. So I've got a few people watching, which is great. Just reminding people watching, if you've got any questions for Lynn, please type them in comments, and you'll have a chance to win a copy of The Silent Listener. I've got a question from Belinda. She said that your book sounds very intriguing, and she wonders if any of the ideas came from any real experience. I know in the bio we said that you used to live in rural Victoria on a farm?
Yes, so there's actually quite a lot of truth in the book. Not so much specific incidents and episodes, although some of them are, but I sometimes have talked about it being an emotional truth. So the setting that the book is in fact the farm that I grew up on. So there are lots of elements of the farm that feature in the book, like a dam and a water tank that actually is a repository for rubbish, different sheds in the farm, the house in the farm, and even the wall hanging that's on the kitchen wall. All of those things were in my home, and it was quite. There's some quite distressing parts of my childhood. I think I don't know whether you ever actually get rid of them, but hopefully I've sort of dealt with. And writing the novel was one way of doing that. But also, interestingly, not just by putting some of that truth into the novel, but also by building in a lot of fiction. So it really gave me a distance that I could have from those events, which fortunately are a long way in the past now. But it was almost kind of fun to introduce Shepherd, the cop, and Vicky, the GP, and a few other characters as well, to, I guess, lighten it a bit, but also to make it more of a story. So, with I'm going to say not just one murder, but 3 suspicious deaths, one from each of the time frames that the book covers. So doing that was really good. So there were no suspicious deaths
in your childhood. Okay. I'm glad you cleared that up. So did you sort of find a little bit of a healing journey?
Yeah, I did. And this is sort of interesting too, because when I was writing scenes that were or are very closely based on my childhood, so essentially the father in the novel is pretty much my father. He was extremely religious, just I'm going to say mainstream Protestant Presbyterian. religion, so nothing sort of really, way out or anything like that. But he was particularly zealous about it, and he also had mental health issues. So those two things combined kind of set up for my brothers and I a fairly difficult childhood. And he said things like, and I think I have got this in the novel. Sometimes you forget which bits didn't quite make it, but this I'm pretty sure is there. My dad did actually say to me that he would be the only unhappy person in heaven because his children would be in hell.
Oh, really? Wow.
And that's a huge thing to live with as a child.
Yeah.
Like that really messes with your brain on many levels. He with distance that I have now, I think he really tried to do the right thing. He just went about it in a very strange way and a very, everything had to be the way he wanted it. And I think he really did want us to, he wanted to make us good so that we would be good enough to get into heaven.
Wow.
So,
And what did family think of you writing about this?
Well, both my parents are dead, and I couldn't have done it. I certainly couldn't have written it while my dad was alive, and he died a couple of decades ago. My mum relatively recently, and I struggled a bit when I was writing it, thinking I don't know how she will feel about this. But she also died before it was published.
Yeah. But you were writing it when she was alive?
Yes, but she didn't ever know what.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
She knew I was writing a novel, and she knew, I think, that it had murders in it. That was a simple way of explaining what I was doing. So she would be thinking that I wrote something maybe like an Agatha Christie cozy murder mystery.
And from your bio, it sounds like you'd been around and with writers, or you've been working with writing for a long time. What made you go out and get your first book published? And
well, I have always wanted to be a novelist since I was literally for as long as I can remember. I always wanted to be an author, a writer, and so it was always something that I projected into the future. And the reason I projected it into the future was because one of the legacies of my father's, my upbringing with my father, was that I emerged from that home with very little self-esteem and certainly not the confidence to think that I could write a novel. I absolutely adored, and still do, of course, reading, and I always put novelists on a pedestal, and I just couldn't ever see that I would be one of those people. And so, I'm in my 60s, so it's taken a long, long time to get to a point where I thought, I think I can do this, and I'm going to try as hard as I can to get it done before I get much older. I kind of got to a point where I thought, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? I have got to buckle down and do it. And it's either going to be good enough and it'll get published, great, or it won't be good enough, and then, I don't know, maybe I can let go of that and just enjoy being a reader.
Yeah. So does that mean that you might have other books that you had written but hadn't been able to put them out there?
Yeah, I had some children's books that I had written when my kids were young.
Okay.
Or I shouldn't say books, stories.
Yeah.
And I even one day rang an agent. This is a long time ago, when you could do things like ring agents. And that I had written this children's book, and I had written it for my son's class at school. And long story how it sort of came about. And the kids really loved it. The teacher got the kids to illustrate it.
Oh, really?
Morning, it became the first thing that they did.
Yeah.
And when we finally finished it, we sort of bound it and put all the kids' illustrations in, and pretty much every kid in that school took it home and read it.
Oh, wow.
And so I thought, maybe there's something here. So I rang this agent and I said, I don't know, you probably get phone calls like this all the time, but this is what's happened. And she said, actually, we don't. And she said, send it to me. I want to read it.
Mm.
I never did. I did not.
Oh, really? Wow.
I did not have confidence to send it
And
off.
do you think there's a chance that you might try and get that published sometime?
Yeah, I think I might resurrect it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work. But that was when my son was in grade 1, so that would make him 6 or something, and he's 31.
Okay. So, and do you think that was because of self-esteem?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I've got a whole lot of children's stories which I wrote for my kids, and also for children of my friends and a few other settings. And I've got a couple of half-baked, terrible novels that will never see the light of day, believe me.
Yeah. So what do you think pushed you?
Pardon?
What do you think pushed you with this novel?
I'm getting old.
Yeah, so just time?
And I do also have to say the distance between the child that I was and the adult that I am now.
Yeah.
And the fact that my dad had died. And weirdly, you know, he had a very strong hold on us, even though my brothers and I had moved away. And, you know, in lots of ways, he didn't have much to do with us. But there's kind of a psychological hold when he's still alive. It's a very strange thing. And, you know, with all the Me Too movement, and Grace Tame, Brittany Higgins, and all of those, and the sexual assault allegations against, you know, people like members of churches and other people always, or sometimes, you know, people say, well, if this happened, why didn't you tell anyone at the time? Why didn't you speak out? Why has it taken, you know, 25 years? And I think that people don't realise the shame that, and the humiliation, and that you don't want to talk about these things. It feels like there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
You know, there isn't. And so but definitely milestone birthdays tend to give you pause
to reflect and yeah. And could you tell us, like, did you do much research for this book?
I have to say no, because I drew so heavily on my life. For a couple of reasons. It's not set in the decade that it would be if I was that child at that age. I moved it back about 10 or 12, 13 years. That was because anyone who's read the book will know why I wanted to have the parents meet just at the end of World War II, or during World War II, because that actually becomes a relevant point much later in the book. And so I've forgotten the question, Jackie.
The research that you did.
So I didn't have to research the events or the district or the climate or anything like that. I did do a bit of research around World War II, that era that I didn't live in. But, you know, to be really honest, it was very minimal. I've got a few friends who are historians, so I asked them about things like conscription and rations and things like that from World War II. And I did a tiny bit of research around, things like the weather. This might be giving some stuff away, I don't know. There's a fire in the novel, and said son, who I wrote the book for, who's now 31, is now a firefighter. So I got some information.
So you could talk to him.
How things burn and stuff like that. So a bit, but not a lot, which was kind of lucky. Yeah.
And Kim has a good question. She said, did you find reading an escape from your childhood, your challenging childhood, or did it help you to see others in similar situations?
I think as a child, great question, Kim. As a child, it was more an escape. You know, it was very peaceful to be reading when I was in my room by myself. So in the novel, the protagonist has a sister, but I did not. So I had a bedroom to myself, and that was kind of like a refuge for me. And I read. I was really an extraordinary, I think sort of an extraordinary reader. At one point, I had literally read every fiction book in the school library.
No.
So yeah, I read to escape and to find out about other lives, and to find out as I got older and realised what books could do. They weren't just adventure stories and like that. I realised that books told you about people and ideas, and that was wonderful. Just, yeah, yeah. One reason why I wanted to be a writer, I wanted to be able to do that.
Yeah. And Belinda says she loves psychological thrillers, and she wonders what you like to read. And I also wonder if maybe there's something you've been reading lately that you could recommend to us.
Yep, great. I read maybe, I'm going to say 3 or 4 psychological thrillers a year. I have to say I didn't realise I was writing a psychological thriller. So the more I read, the more I thought, I should read a few more of these. So I've read in the last couple of years in particular, I've probably read a few more. I like reading, I guess, what might be called literary fiction, because I love language and I love seeing how writers use language to paint pictures or ideas or take you places and into times and that are different, and how they do it with their language is, for me, an absolute delight. Books that I'm reading, I did come prepared, and I know you've had Jackie Byron on the show before.
Yeah.
Rereading, in fact, Happy Hour, because I'm interviewing Jackie myself in Queenscliff Literary Festival.
Okay.
Months, I think. This one is non-fiction. It's absolutely fantastic. Humankind, A Hopeful History, by this amazing Dutch, I think, writer called Rutger Bregman. The man is a genius. I think he's about 35.
I haven't heard that one.
And this is great for the times that we live in, just to remind us that most people are decent and compassionate and caring and so on. But he's an historian, so he's taken a historical, almost archaeological look at it. Reaching back into the past, I'm rereading.
Oh, yes, yeah.
I can't remember when I did read it. I think it must have been about 17. Le Carre, who died, of course, fairly recently, but one of the characters in my next book is reading this, so I thought I'd better read it. It's a great novel, but interestingly, I think it shows that it was kind of written a long time ago. I think editors would take a completely different tack with this in 2022. And the other book, which I've only recently finished, which isn't in Australia.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one, yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. I think it's pronounced Ayer. I actually asked JP Murray how to pronounce it because it's from New Zealand. That's sort of roughly what he told me. And it's really terrific. It has similar themes to The Silent Listener, but everything is through the eyes of a young boy who's been orphaned and goes to live with his aunt and uncle and slowly kind of works out what's going on. But there's another backstory to it as well, and a side story, and they all converge. It's really, really good. And a couple of books I'm reading for research for my next novel too.
Thanks for those recommendations. Seeing as you mentioned your next novel, are you able to share anything at all about that?
Yes. So the best bit about it is that I signed a 2-book deal with Penguin.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Which is I feel so lucky and privileged. So I'm basing this one also on some true life events, but not from my life, from those of a couple of friends of mine. One who is a bit older than me, and she gave birth to a child many years ago when she was not married, and she was living in America, and she went to one of these homes for unmarried mothers. And I've done a whole lot of research, mainly reading this book, but also some others, about this period that was called the baby scoop era, when
So
these
was
young
that in like the 60s or 7?
yeah, from sort of post World War II up until
Mm,
1960s, where women who were unmarried, didn't really matter what age you were, but obviously were young, were, I'm going to say, coerced into or cajoled their infants. And there was this very huge demand for newborn white and actually preferably female infants.
Oh, yeah.
And these couples who wanted them were kind of pretty much waiting there to literally kind of scoop up the baby the moment it was born. And so there's a lot of ramifications about that. So I've got a couple of what am I going to say, mysteries.
Yeah.
how I talk about it, A, because I haven't finished it, and B, therefore I don't know necessarily what's going to happen, but just long-term ramifications of that and the unpacking of people who maybe had, you know, less than ethical practices around all of that. So.
Yeah, no, that sounds really interesting. And have to say, I really loved watching Love Child.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And like it opens your eyes a lot. Of like I sort of knew things that did happen, but to actually hear the whole extent of it and everything.
Yeah, and a lot of people will be familiar with Philomena, the movie with Judi Dench, and so I've gone down a very different path, but there's, you know, obviously some elements that are similar. And I find it very interesting too, because when I do talk about it with friends or anybody else, so many people have stories to tell that are very similar or tap into that era around babies and secrets, a lot of secrets.
Yeah. No, that sounds very interesting.
I hope so. I'm trying to make it interesting.
Yeah. I'm wondering with The Silent Listener, did that ever start off like with you thinking it might be a memoir?
No, I don't think I ever thought it would be a memoir. I think I just couldn't have done that for a couple of reasons. One, I don't think my life is that interesting. No, it just isn't. And two, I think I did have to put some distance between what happened in my life and what was going to happen in the novel. And so writing it, some of it in third person, or particularly when Joy is a child, writing that in third person was terrific. And in actual fact, I did start writing it in first person, and I had done a lot of it in first person, so talking about I, me, etc. And then one day I thought, I think I need to put this into third person.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, days, I guess, changing it, but I think it was all for the better.
Yeah. So when you started writing, did you know how it was going to end?
No way.
When did the ending come to you?
The ending, which is fairly significant, I guess, there's a whole lot of kind of, as they should, I guess, in a novel, things, unanswered questions are answered, and I'm going to say things work out perhaps the way they should or need to. I think I wrote about 4 different endings.
Oh, okay, really, yeah.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure for a long time, and some of the chapters that are towards the end originally were close to the beginning.
Okay.
I sort of saw how the structure of it was going to work. It's kind of about when do you reveal certain things, and just because I had that chapter very early on while I was writing doesn't mean that it has to be very early on in the book. So that was kind of a big learning exercise too, to realise that I controlled where everything appeared in the book.
Yeah. And I liked like the different times and the different eras. When you write, do you just write one era straight through, or how do you do that?
No, so when I started, I was just going to have the 2 eras, Joy as a 12-year-old and Joy as an adult coming back to look after her father. and I was kind of alternating between them and then a long story, but then I ended up putting in the chapters that started, sort of in the middle or towards the end of World War II, and traced Joy's parents' sort of courtship and moving to the farm and the unravelling of their relationship. And I used to just sort of hop between them. And then one day I thought, no, I have to separate them. So I put them into separate files in Word and worked on each story independently for a while. And then, that sounds like a great idea, but then I had to weave them all back together again.
Yeah.
That was really hard. At one point, I have to say, I was thinking, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if it's going to work out. So it was really tough and, But anyway, I did it. But it took a long time, and I was sort of thinking, why did I ever separate from that?
So how long did it actually take you to write it?
Well, I started writing in, I'm going to say 20 years ago, but I was kind of faffing around and just doing these kind of little scenes, and I didn't even ever think that it would actually be a novel. I was just writing, I don't know, we would call it flash fiction almost now, just sort of 500 or 600 words at a time, maybe 1,000 if I got on a roll or something like that. And they're all just sort of standalone scenes, but always with the same characters, or sometimes another character might come in, like the next door neighbours, who have their own secret, of course. And then I sort of started putting it together. So it did take a long time, but I'm going to say that it was really only in the last 5 years leading up to publications. It came out a year ago, so yeah, about 6 years ago, when I thought I have to get serious about this.
Yeah. And how many people or agent did you have to try before you found someone who would publish?
I pitched to maybe 3 publishers via Anthony Art's novel writing masterclasses in Melbourne, and I had a bit of interest in that. I think all 3 asked to see either the first few chapters or the whole manuscript, but none of them picked it up. And each time that happens, you just think, no, I'm no good. It's never going to happen. And then I spoke to an editor who I'd sort of come across for some kind of day job work, and she really liked it, and she gave me the name. She said, you need an agent. And she'd only read, I think, 1 chapter, and she pushed across the cafe table the name of 2 agents, actually, and I got in touch with one of them. And the novel wasn't finished then, but I wrote to her and she said, get back in touch with me when it's finished. So 2 years later,
you got,
and she really loved it. And that was in January 2019, maybe February, by the time she read it and got back to me. And by June, I had a publishing contract.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I was very lucky.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, for you, what do you think makes a good story?
Great question. I think a good story has great characters and a variety of characters, not all the same. And it has, I'm going to say, progression. So every time you read a chapter, something has to happen that takes you further down a trajectory towards the end, whatever it is. And I think you have to learn more about the characters in each chapter or scene. So I don't like things that are, I'm going to say, still. But that doesn't mean I don't like slow novels. Sometimes they're just beautiful to and savour. But in terms of what makes a good story, I think it's really interesting characters. I'm going to say realistic dialogue. Yeah. Important, of course. And this sort of constant sort of progression of the story, so that I want to hear what's going to happen next. I want to find out what's going to happen next. And I know I really like oral storytelling. So I did a lot of reading to my kids when they were little. do now. And, you know, like a lot of cultures that have very strong oral storytelling traditions. And I think it's almost something that we perhaps have lost a little bit in the very age. And sometimes I think about when I'm writing, if I read this out to someone, would they stay interested? Would they stay attuned, or would their minds wander? So I'm sort of always trying to think about, okay, I have to write this so that people will remain interested in it.
No, that's great. Kelly wonders what's been your favourite part of your author journey so far?
I have to say things like this.
Yeah.
The first one I did, I was so nervous. I honestly thought my heart was going to explode. I've never experienced it before in my life. My heart was just was incredible. That was at Clunes Book Fest last year. And but yeah, meeting other writers and meeting readers and doing talks like this, I kind of weirdly didn't have any idea it was going to be like this.
Yeah.
And far the best thing. I mean, I love being published. I love having my book on a shelf, and hopefully lots of other shelves as well. And I have this massive sense of achievement and accomplishment from doing that. But it's the people I've met and the conversations I've had with readers and writers and interviewers. Absolutely, I could do it all day, every day.
No, that's really great to hear. I'm wondering, have you had a lot of readers contact you and say they've experienced like similar, and maybe it's brought things up for them? Or
I've had people approach me at writers' festivals.
Yeah.
I've had people contact me through Instagram, and a few via email if they've sort of got my email address. And I've had friends who, since the book has come out, since they've read it, and we've had, you know, coffee or lunch together, friends sit across the table and say, I read your book and I thought, oh my God, it's like you were in my home.
Yeah. So how do you handle that, or how do you find that?
You know, I sort of get quite enraged on their behalf that their parents or whoever it might have been, generally parents, which is just weird, you know, just awful. I get really angry on their behalf that happened to them. Angrier than I get about what happened to me.
Oh, really?
And I think it's because for me, it's just, well, that's part of, you know, that's part of who I am and my history. But when I hear about it with other people, especially people I know, whether they're friends or acquaintances, because that's not part of the history I know of them, I find it, I just find it awful.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I guess, you know, when that's happened, we haven't sort of talked so much in detail. It's just, I think there's more just an acknowledgement or a recognition that we don't need to know the details. We just have a shared understanding
of each other. Yeah.
Trauma like that. And yeah, it's been really interesting. And I had one of my friends who her book club did it many months ago, and Marsha wrote to me afterwards and said, I have to tell you what one of the women in our book club said last night. So she said, I think she was about 70, and she said that she had a similar childhood, and she said reading this book gave her peace and closure for the first time in her life.
Oh, really? Yeah.
She said, please tell Lynn, thank her for writing this book, for bringing up an issue that is all too often swept under the carpet. And I mean, I honestly thought, okay, that's it, my job is done. And just one person achieved a measure of peace after having lived through.
Yeah, that must be a pretty great feeling to know that as well.
Yeah, it really was terrific. So I am actually still quite amazed at how many people have
Mm, mm,
experienced.
mm. And Kelly wonders if you read your reviews. She said she loves how it's described as a suspenseful novel in the Gothic heart of rural Australia.
That's good, isn't it? I like that. Yeah, I think most authors say when their first book comes out, they read every review avidly, and then inevitably you're going to get some people who don't like it. So on Goodreads and sites like that, I've learnt to well, basically I don't go there anymore.
Yeah.
The reviews that I've really liked are ones that have been in the press, so that's been great. I've had The Age and Sydney Morning Herald and Canberra Times and a few others, and some magazines and things like that. And I think people are, reviewers are kind generally. Professional reviewers, they understand how you might react to unkind comments. But I have been very lucky. I've had some absolutely wonderful and generous reviews. So I like them.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, looking at like book bloggers and people like that. There's always a good mix of what I liked and what I didn't like about this book. And I think it's sort of interesting because look, this book had to be the way that it was, but in this next book, because I'm not really basing it on really true stories, just things that happened to a couple of my friends, I think I'm more attuned to what readers are looking for in this kind of book. So I think I'm going to aim to, or I am aiming to provide perhaps a bit more, I don't want to say what readers expect, but having read the occasional line that says, I didn't like, in roundabout ways, I didn't like this, or she could have done this differently, I sort of think,
so you've taken some notice of the,
yeah. So it's really interesting and enlightening.
Yeah. And your new book certainly sounds like that's another one that will bring up a lot of emotions for readers and maybe secrets and
yes.
So
and again,
I can imagine
I feel like I want to bring to people's attention what happened in those times. And I know people might say, well, it happened a long time ago, it doesn't happen anymore. But, I think we do need to know about those things. And B, while those specific things might not happen, I mean, maybe they do, we don't know. It happens everywhere, of course. But, I think we can see that there are parallels in other aspects of society and including Australia, not just overseas and so on. And that, it's that thing, if you don't know your history, it can repeat. Or be attuned to what people can sometimes do and why they do it. I think the why is important as well. So, and placing it sort of back in history again gives people some distance so they can think about the issues without being perhaps too confronted about, well, what am I supposed to do about that right now? There's some, a more it's a sort of distanced way of thinking about it, but hopefully to end up thinking, well, we can never allow those sorts of things to happen again. And where they're, winding back women's reproductive rights and things like that. I think I get concerned about that sort of thing. So it's to remind people what happened in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for chatting with me. It's been really great to talk to you.
Thanks, Jackie. It's, as I said, I love these and I love them. Hearing what readers are thinking and wondering.
Yeah. And hopefully looking forward to reading another one of your books and hopefully seeing sometime soon that you've got some of your children's books published as well.
Yes, must talk to Penguin about that.
Just wondering before you go, do you want to tell people how they can keep in touch with you?
Yep, so I have a website which is yeowart.com, very easy to remember. Hopefully, I have to get the spelling of my surname right, but that's right. I'm on Instagram as Yeowart, Twitter. I don't do much booky stuff on Twitter, and I have a Facebook site or page which is Yeowart Author. So hopefully, all very easy to get on touch onto.
Yeah, thanks so much, and thanks to everyone who joined in and the questions that were asked.
Right, thanks so much.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.